Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about making room for God, or whatever you call divinity, source, higher power, your own higher self, universal will, or the life force. Regardless of what you call it, making room or space in our lives for spirit or soul work can have a big impact on our life experience and our experience of life. And we could consider our life experience as the external circumstances or our life situation, and our experience of life is our internal circumstances, our emotional, mental, relational, and transpersonal lens. And one of the interesting things about being a human on the material plane is that our outside world and our inside world are very interactive. What's happening outside can have profound impact on our internal experience, of course, and our internal experience can have profound effect on our external circumstances. In fact, it could be understood that our external circumstances are a manifestation of what's actually happening inside of ourselves, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And when we examine our external life, our material or physical life experience as a metaphor for what's happening inside, we can work with that in really powerful ways that can have a profound impact on both our interior and our exterior life experience. Before I became a therapist, I cleaned houses for 12 years. And although scrubbing people's toilets is humble service in many ways, I absolutely loved it. I loved working for myself. People paid me good money and were extremely appreciative. I got to work in beautiful spaces where people really cared about their things and their homes. It was a very important spiritual practice of being happy and grateful for what is. I got to let go of the burden of potential and a lot of other people's ideas for what I should be doing with my life, and just experience simple hard work for good money, making my own hours, and being able to take 6 to 8 weeks of vacation and travel time each year. And there was a whole set of back-end teachings that I got from being a maid that I wasn't fully aware of at the time. I have some pretty serious hoarding in my ancestry. At the end of her life, my grandmother lived in an apartment upstairs in the house I grew up in. And the entire place, from the front door back through the kitchen, was stuffed floor to ceiling with boxes, bags, and stacks of paper. There was a pathway that you could walk that led into the bathroom, into the kitchen, where there was one space at the table for her and my grandfather to eat at, and then another path that led to the bed. And the bathtub was filled with enough cleaning products and dust-encrusted tchotchkes to fill the back of a pickup truck. I never asked how they washed, because they certainly hadn't used that tub in a long time. My grandparents were lovely people, but hoarding is an addiction. And all addictions are dysfunctional attempts at managing unresolved emotional or spiritual issues. And although the particular suffering underlying each addiction is unique to each person, in general, hoarding could be seen as an inability to let things go and a fear of not having enough. And again, the physical world is often a metaphor for our emotional, relational, or spiritual world. One of the big things I learned from housekeeping was how to care for stuff in a manageable, sustainable way. I helped people do spring cleaning and annual reorganization. I helped people go through their clothes and donate what they don't wear anymore. I learned by the example of my clients how to have a functional relationship with stuff. It was not only helpful, it was incredibly healing. And I believe in the conversational nature of reality, and that the choices we make and the actions that we take are our half of the conversation. And what the universe offers, gifts, removes, or withholds is part of the conversation as well. So it's very easy to get addicted to our material goods And much of the information we get from our consumer culture would lead us to believe that if you can get the right car, the right clothes, the right watch, jewelry, or iPhone, that it'll make us cool, sexy, powerful. Perhaps if we could gather the correct quality and quantity of things, then we would be complete. This is a terrible lie, mostly designed to sell things so that the people who work for and run those companies and corporations that sell these things can pursue their own desire for completeness and their own pursuit of gathering wealth and material goods. Navigating the material world is a lifelong challenge. And although I aim to live simply, it is not easy to do. And like it or not, part of modern life and Western culture is managing an accumulation of stuff. Clothing, shoes, furniture, artwork, tools, vehicles. Books are a big one for me. In fact, in the information age in which we live, gathering information can be just as time and space consuming as gathering material goods. We gather information from the news, from the internet. We get information about people from social media. But I remain fascinated about how our physical space is a direct metaphor with our internal space. What's happening with my house, for me, is a direct correlation with what's happening for me mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So I talk a lot about if we change our internal world, that our external world will change accordingly. And in this podcast, I want to talk about how changing our external world can change our internal experience as well. When my house is messy, dirty, or cluttered, it usually points to emotional, relational, or mental clutter within myself. And for me, when my space is orderly and clean, it generally points to a period of peace and manageability in my internal space as well. Now, things are constantly in flux, and having worked in people's homes for a long time, just because everything looks perfect on the outside doesn't mean it's perfect on the inside. Some people rigidly need everything to be in its place because they're extremely controlling and filled with fear, and anything out of order disrupts them. But because each person is unique, our relationship with our material goods and our physical space is specific to each person. Now, I like it when my house is organized and neat, but honestly, it's not terribly clean. And I throw trash in the backseat of my car constantly. And I actually kind of like my car being dirty. I'm not completely sure what that's about. It might be a little bit fuck the rules, and it might be a little bit pushing back against my own perfectionism, because perfectionism has been debilitating for me, and I've done a lot of work to beat it or dissolve it out of myself. But the first time I really viscerally got the connection between my material stuff and my life circumstances and how I could work with it in a direct and powerful way was after a 3-week retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh and the monks and nuns of Plum Village. And Thich Nhat Hanh, if you're not familiar with him, is a Vietnamese Buddhist monk who's done a lot to bring Zen principles into the Western world. And Plum Village is his monastery in the south of France. And so I had this experience of living with these monks and nuns who owned nothing but 2 robes, an eating bowl, and a pair of sandals. Now, some of them had sneakers too, but none of them had hair, even the women. I'm kind of into hair, so that was like, whoa. And they brought the whole monastery over to southern Vermont. And I don't want to over-idealize monastic life, but many of those monks and nuns were incredibly happy, and they owned nothing. They took vows of celibacy and poverty, and celibacy and poverty are not things we learn a lot about in America. And up to that point, I had spent much of my time and energy trying to get the right relationship, the right job, and the right ratio of stuff so that I would be happy. And I grew up in the land of more is better, and it had never occurred to me that perhaps having less stuff might make room for the things I really wanted in my life. And this was in my early 30s. I was on the heels of what some might call a losing streak. I would choose to call it a series of learning experiences. I had started 2 businesses which failed. I had a short, disastrous marriage which ended in divorce and bankruptcy. And on the other side of that retreat, I was to be moving into a new apartment. That fell through, and my boyfriend at the time asked me to move in with him, and that only lasted a short time. And that relationship ended, and I was couch surfing for a while. But I still had all this stuff that I was trying to manage and drag around with me from when I was married. And it occurred to me that my mate wasn't working so good, that forcing my will upon the universe didn't seem to be very successful. And my ideas for what I thought would make me happy really hadn't made me very happy. And I decided to take a hint from the monks and nuns of Plum Village and let it all go and see what would happen if I just made room for God's will in my life, since my will just didn't seem to be working out very well. And so I had a yard sale, and I sold all my stuff, brought my material goods down to 1 suitcase and 9 boxes, mostly filled with books, and I moved into the small room of a friend's mother's. And my life got really simple. I cleaned houses, I meditated a lot, and went to some 12-step meetings. I decided to take some time off of dating and just make some space. Up to that point in my conversation with the universe, I'd been doing all the talking, and I decided to take some time to listen. And I suppose there's a lot to be said about setting intentions and the law of attraction, but my attractor seemed to be kind of broken. So I shut her down, and I discovered that I really liked the space. I even started to consider if I should become a monastic, but a very kind of undramatic series of events unfolded that ended up giving me very clear direction for my life. And at the end of 6 or 8 months, I ended up moving to California, finding a graduate school and beginning my training in depth hypnosis and shamanic healing. Somewhere in there, I reconnected with an old boyfriend, and we decided to get married and have 2 children in a very healthy and successful 20-year relationship. Now, I'm not going to tell you if you sell all your stuff and meditate for 6 months, your life's going to fall into place the way that mine did, but you never know. But letting go of my material goods was a metaphor for letting go of my internal attachments of how things should look or what I thought I needed. And that idea of making room for God can be used in much smaller ways, of course. Recently, my garage was kind of an overgrown disaster as my ex-husband and I kind of sort out and separate the last of our physical material goods. And I could feel that what was happening in my garage was similar to what was happening for me kind of emotionally and unconsciously. Lots of change. My kids are moving into a new phase. A lot happening professionally. Needing to sort through the boxes of my old life, release what no longer serves, and reorganize what I want to keep so that it's more functional going forward. Marie Kondo, the Japanese organizing guru who wrote the wonderful little book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, has this wonderful gem when you consider sorting through things on the physical plane, and I would say on the emotional and mental plane as well. When you hold an item, ask yourself, does this bring me joy? And if it doesn't, let it go. Now, I also have what I call the 2-minute rule, which is if you're spending more than 2 minutes trying to decide if you're going to keep it or not, just keep it. Don't let it take up too much time or space. Because that's the problem with having a lot of things, is that we need to care for the things, and that takes time. And if I want to spend my time caring for my things, that's fine. But if caring for my things takes away time that I would rather be spending having interesting, deep, or creative experiences, then I might want to consider removing the thing so that I have the space to have the experience instead. Or, like the experience I had, perhaps I'll just enjoy the space, because we can get addicted to doing stuff as well. The idea, am I a human being or am I a human doing? And cultivating our own sense of being is something most of us have no idea how to do. So as I spent a few weeks kind of contemplating how I was going to reorg my garage, there was a reorg happening internally as well. I remember when I was trying to get pregnant with my son, And I was trading some work with this intuitive. And I got married when I was 38. And everybody wanted to tell me, how hard it was going to be to get pregnant that old. I had spent my whole life, of course, trying not to get pregnant. Now I was going to turn around and try to get pregnant. And I was still cleaning houses. I was finishing up graduate school and this depth hypnosis training. And the woman said to me, I can feel the spirit of the baby right here, but there's no room for him. And I knew exactly what she was talking about. And so I became willing to let go, to make room in my business, to make room in my professional life, and let go of my fierce attachment to emotional and material independence, and really make room to become a mother. And I got pregnant 3 weeks later. So if there's something that you want in your life, consider making physical space for it. If you want a live-in partner, you might want to make more room in your closet. Loosen up your attachment to your own ways of being in your space or how you use your time. Perhaps ask the question, how can I make room for God? On that Buddhist retreat, there was a wonderful story told of two brothers. One is a monk and the other is a farmer. And the monk one day is sitting under a tree enjoying the shade and his simple bowl of rice. And his brother, the farmer, comes running up. Brother, terrible things have happened. One of the cows kicked the door of the barn open and all the cows escaped. I'm ruined. And the monk continues to eat his rice and says, Oh, brother, I am sorry you are suffering. And the farmer says, How can you be so calm? This is terrible. I've lost everything. And the monk says, I am calm, brother, because I have no cows to lose. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, consider sharing it with a friend or leaving a good review. If you'd like to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life or learn more about my 3-month mentorship program, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com, and check us out on Instagram @OpenDoorGrowth. You can download the first chapter of my book, workbook, and audio series, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing. There's a link in the show notes. And thanks as always to my supporters on Patreon. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.